Christmas Eve. As the sound of ripping gift wrap filled the living room, I, Ruth, 70 years old, still sat empty-handed. No one noticed. I stood, pulled the zipper of my purse, drew out a thick stack of papers, and threw it onto the table. This is the contract to sell the company. $8,200,000. Mine. The crowded room fell silent, like a cemetery. And then, the sharp clatter of a spoon hitting the tile floor. I still hear that sound in my head, the faint strike of metal against stone. Yet heavy as thunder. They looked at me as if I were a ghost. My hands trembled. But not from weakness, from bitterness. Only when I laid millions of dollars before them did they truly see me. Before that, I was just the old woman at the end of the table. Outside the window, Christmas lights blinked red and green, their glow reflected in the cold coffee cup before me. The wall clock ticked steadily, stretching the silence. I drew a long breath, the chill seeping deep into my lungs. In that grand room, I realized the scariest truth isn't being forgotten, it's being remembered only for money. But to understand why I stood there, under the flickering Christmas lights and those frozen faces, we have to go back many years, back to who I really was. I am Ruth, 70 years old. My whole life was tied to school notebooks, chalkboards, and the ringing of the school bell. I taught elementary school in a small suburb outside Pittsburgh, spending more than 30 years in the classroom. I loved children. Loved the bright eyes when they first read a full sentence, or when they confidently raised their hands to solve a tough math problem. That joy was enough to carry me through countless cold winters in the Northeast. When my husband, Mark, died suddenly of a heart attack, my world fell into an endless silence. The 3-bedroom house where we once shared every dinner and every morning was left with nothing but the ticking of a clock and the faint smell of old wood in the air. I forced myself to keep teaching a few more years, until my strength would no longer allow it. Retirement came sooner than I expected, and life shrank into that modest suburban home. My son, David, had once been the pride of our family. The day he graduated college, I cried from happiness. I believed that no matter where life took him, he would always remember he had a home to return to. But then David married Patricia, a sharp, intelligent woman working in marketing. At first, I tried to open my heart to my daughter-in-law. I still remember the first dinner I invited them home. I cooked the beef stew David had loved since childhood. But Patricia took just a small bite, set it back down, and smiled politely. "Thank you, Mom. But lately I've been eating healthier, avoiding heavy dishes." I forced a smile, but something pierced inside me. At later family dinners, I began to feel like an outsider in the very house that had once been so warm. While everyone chatted about contracts, vacations, or business plans, I sat quietly sipping tea. Each time I spoke up, Patricia would slip in with a clever joke or a small correction, turning my words into trivial fragments nobody cared about. And David, instead of defending me, usually stayed silent, his eyes drifting away. I told myself, he's busy. He just wants to avoid tension. But that silence, year after year, felt like a cold blade pressing deeper into me. One time, I brought over a freshly baked apple pie, thinking it would delight the kids. The youngest let out a little cheer. But Patricia quickly said, "Oh, thank you, Mom, Ruth. But the kids are cutting back on sweets. I'll put this in the fridge. Maybe another day." Another day. But I knew that day would never come. That night, I went home, set the pie on my kitchen counter, and watched it grow cold. Suddenly, I saw myself in that pie once filled with anticipation, now pushed aside, unwanted. The breaking point came on my 68th birthday. I woke early, arranged a vase of yellow chrysanthemums on the table, set out my finest teacups, hoping for a visit, a small cake, or at least a card from my children and grandchildren. The entire day slipped by with only the ticking of the wall clock, the sound of cars outside, and the wind whistling through the doorframe. No phone call, no message, no knock on the door. That evening, I lit a single candle on a store-bought muffin. As the flame flickered, I whispered happy birthday, Ruth. The candle wavered, then died, leaving the kitchen drowned in darkness. I broke down, sobbing like a child, not because of missing gifts or parties, but because of a brutal truth: I no longer had a place in the lives of those I loved most. After that day, I changed. I stopped waiting for the doorbell, stopped checking my phone every morning. I learned to cook small meals for one, learned to sit in silence without turning on the TV, just to fill the emptiness. But inside, part of me still twisted in pain. How could a mother, who gave her whole life in sacrifice, and become excess baggage so quickly? That pain never disappeared. It only settled, like ashes cooling over hidden embers. And I didn't know then that very ash, one day, would ignite into a flame bright enough to light up that cold Christmas Eve room. 3 years earlier, on another Christmas Eve, I felt a bone-deep cold, not only from Pittsburgh's snowy sky, but from inside my own heart. It was the first year after I retired. I had prepared for that gathering with every scrap of excitement I had left. I baked a pumpkin pie using my mother's recipe and wrapped a few small gifts for the grandchildren, not expensive things, just picture books and a few wool scarves I had knitted all autumn. I thought, they'll be so happy. When I arrived at David's house, I stood at the door a moment, listening to the booming laughter inside. My heart raced. I pressed the doorbell. The door opened, warm yellow light spilling out, and the smell of roast filling the air. Patricia stepped forward in a red dress, lips painted bright, smiling politely. "Oh, Mom, Ruth, you're here." Her hug came so quickly I hadn't even set the gift bag down. David came out holding the youngest child while staring at his phone. He glanced up and said quickly, "Hi, Mom. Come on in." I entered the living room. The Christmas tree glittered in the corner, presents piled like a small mountain. I set my bag down beside them, hoping someone would notice. Dinner passed quickly. Laughter, the clink of cutlery, stories about work, projects, and trips. I sat at the end of the table, listening more than speaking. Each time I tried to squeeze in a small remark, Patricia would change the subject, or David would clear his throat, and my words would vanish into the noisy conversation. I remember the moment of gift-giving clearly. Patricia stood beneath the tree, calling out names. The kids rushed forward, tearing open packages and squealing with delight. David laughed and snapped photos, while Patricia straightened the mess of boxes on the floor. I sat there with my hands on my knees, waiting to hear the name Mom or Grandma. Names were called, one grandchild after another. Then David. Then Patricia. At last, the presents were opened. Wrapping paper littered the floor. But no one called my name. I swallowed and forced a smile. Maybe they saved mine for later, I told myself. But there was no later. No small box. No card. No look that acknowledged the empty space in front of me. The oldest granddaughter, Emily, glanced at me as if she meant to say something, then bent over the new bracelet she'd just received. Patricia laughed and hugged David, saying loudly, "You really are the best." This year, I got everything I wanted. The kids' applause sounded like the end of the gift exchange. As for me, I sat with my gift bag pushed to the side, unopened. When everyone returned to conversation, I stood up quietly. No one noticed. I put on my thick sweater and stepped out onto the porch. The snow fell harder, and the wind bit my face. I tightened my scarf, trying to hold back the tears, but they came anyway, hot and stinging on my cold cheeks. I walked a long way through the snow. Christmas lights from other houses shimmering. Through their windows I saw families gathered, carols playing. In that moment I wondered, who was I in my own family? A mother? Or just free help, an old woman baking pies, knitting scarves, bringing gifts no one needed. My heels sank into the deep snow with a steady crunch. I stopped and looked up at the gray sky, where snowflakes spun down like soulless white paper. The loneliness in my chest was colder than the winter wrapping around me. I returned home to a dark kitchen. The wilted bouquet still stood on the table. I set my gift bag down and sank into a chair. When I opened the bag and saw the small things I had prepared with all my love, I burst into tears. The house echoed with my sobs, and the clock's ticks felt like knife strokes, tick, tock, tick, tock. That night, I stayed awake. The question kept repeating in my head: had I become invisible? Was my love worth anything, only when tied to money or some condition? The next morning, with snow blanketing the porch, I went outside to sweep the walk. Each sweep felt like dumping anger, like trying to erase the scratches in my heart. But the pain didn't fade, it settled, waiting to rise again. And that Christmas Eve, when I was completely forgotten, became a line in the sand. Before that, I still had hope. After that, I only had silence. That afternoon, I came back inside and hung my thick sweater on the rack. The living room was dim, lit only by the quiet glow from the fogged window. I sat down in the armchair, my eyes falling on the wooden cabinet by the fireplace. That was where I kept many of Mark's mementos. I hadn't dared open it for a long time, because each time I did, the longing for him rushed over me like a wave, pulling me under. But that day, for some reason, I wanted to look again. Maybe the emptiness made me crave an unseen hand to hold. I opened the bottom drawer. The smell of old wood, mixed with the faint scent of aged paper, rose up. There it was, a brown leather notebook, its corners worn by time. It was the notebook Mark always carried. He was a mechanical engineer, but beyond calculations and machines, he had a deep passion for jotting down ideas. Many nights, long after I had gone to bed, he would still be at his desk, the lamp casting light across the pages as he wrote in his neat, steady hand. I placed the notebook on my lap, my hands trembling as I turned the pages. Technical formulas, sketches, diagrams, scattered notes about life. Every page carried Mark's spirit, careful, patient, and always forward-looking. In the middle of the book, I stopped. One page held just a single line, written with firm strokes but filled with emotion. If one day you find yourself left behind, turn the pain into strength. I stared at those words for a long time, my fingers tracing each letter as if I could touch his hand. My vision blurred. I could almost hear him whispering, his voice low and gentle. Ruth, don't let them decide your worth. I closed the notebook and held it against my chest. For the first time in years, I felt something besides sorrow. A faint spark flickered, fragile but undeniable. I sat there, letting the cold draft seep through the cracks. But inside me, a different kind of warmth grew. As evening came, I brewed a cup of black tea and set the notebook beside me. Each sip of hot tea seemed to push back the chill pressing in. I remembered how often Mark encouraged me to try new things. He used to say, "You see things others don't. Ruth, don't just teach kids how to spell. You have stories, experiences. You can do more than this." Back then, I only smiled, shaking my head, insisting I belonged to chalk and blackboards. But now, sitting in that empty house. I realized his words weren't just encouragement. They were a message meant for this very future. I began turning more pages, searching for the fragments he had left behind. There were small ideas, a water-saving tool for the garden, a shop to improve second-hand goods, even a little community project in the neighborhood. Mark never carried them out. But each note planted a seed. Don't stop. Don't let yourself become invisible. That night, I didn't go to bed early. I spread the notebook open on the kitchen table, took out a fresh journal, and started writing. Not formulas or diagrams, but the things I wanted to try, rewriting memories, sharing experiences, telling my own stories. At first my hand shook, but the more I wrote, the steadier it grew. I realized how many years I had kept everything locked inside, never daring to set it on paper, as Mark had done. Outside, the snow kept falling silently. Inside, the clock struck with its dry rhythm. But for me, time felt like a door opening. Mark's words still echoed in my mind. Turn the pain into strength, I whispered softly, as if making a vow. I will. Mark, I will turn this pain into something that matters. The desk lamp shone across the blank page, casting light on my face. For the first time since that cold Christmas Eve, I saw in my eyes not only sorrow, there was something else, a quiet determination. In the days that followed, I began a new routine. Early in the morning I still brewed my cup of black coffee, sitting by the window watching the snow melt on the neighbors' rooftops. But instead of letting my mind drift into loneliness, I opened Mark's notebook and set it beside my old laptop. I decided I would learn. But learn what I typed uncertainly into the search bar. What new jobs can older adults start? The results were endless. Blogging, online selling, digital product design, even starting a YouTube channel. I read page after page, my eyes blurring, my heart both anxious and excited. At night, when the city grew quiet, I switched on the small desk lamp and opened a free online course. A young instructor's voice rang out. If you're just starting, don't worry. Everyone begins at zero. I smiled bitterly. Zero. That was exactly where I stood. I learned how to build a blog, choose a domain name, upload images, write the first post. That first entry was only a few hundred words about a winter morning and the small joy of making coffee for myself. I hit publish, my heart pounding as if I had stepped onto a stage. And then, silence. No readers. No comments. I checked the views all day long. The number stayed at 0. I didn't give up. I learned how to design simple notebook templates using Canva. I remember the first night clearly. Staring at the result, a pale purple cover with the words, Daily Notes. I felt like a child drawing a full picture for the first time. I uploaded it to an online marketplace. But after days passed, no one bought it. My phone buzzed with the notification 0 orders, and my heart sank. Some nights, I closed the laptop, laid my hand on Mark's notebook, and sighed. Maybe I'm too old for this. Mark, but then his eyes returned in my memory. Along with that line, turn the pain into strength. I reopened the laptop. The same scene repeated for weeks, me sitting alone in the small kitchen. The glow of the screen casting blue light over my wrinkled face. Those wrinkles no longer showed exhaustion. They reflected a determination I never knew I had. I studied SEO writing, learned about keywords, learned how to craft catchy titles. I stumbled forward like a new student. Once, I posted a long entry about the day Mark died, about how I had to clean out his garage every wrench, every bolt still slick with oil. I wrote it all, then nervously pressed publish. A few days later, I received my first comment. This touched my heart. I also lost my husband last year. I read that line over and over, tears spilling down my cheeks. It wasn't an order. But it was more valuable than anything else. The first sign that someone was listening. But failures still outweighed successes. I spent weeks designing a printed calendar, convinced it would sell for New Year's. Result: not a single order. I wrote a series of articles about budget recipes, but no one cared. Each time, I scolded myself. Maybe I'm a bad writer. Maybe no one needs to hear an old woman ramble. Yet instead of quitting, I began to see those failures as homework life was assigning me. I searched for new tutorials, took notes, tried again. In the quiet kitchen, the sounds became familiar: the tapping of keys, the sighs, the clicking of the mouse. Outside, the neighbor's lights had long gone dark, but I still sat there, silver hair catching the glow of the screen. One evening, I laughed at the reflection in the window, an old woman hunched over a laptop, thick glasses on, scribbling notes like she was cramming for an exam. But instead of shame, I felt a rush of excitement. I knew I was on the right path. Each time a project failed, I imagined Mark saying, "It's okay, Ruth. Fix what's wrong. If a machine can be repaired, so can people." And so I tried again. One more night, one more product, one more article. Those were the first days of starting from zero. Failures surrounded me. But within each failure I saw something clear, at least this time. I was no longer invisible. I was writing, creating, daring to take steps forward. And every word I typed onto the keyboard felt like a message sent into the Pittsburgh night sky: I'm still here. Mark. And I'm starting over. One February morning, when the weak sunlight filtered through the fogged window, I opened my laptop and felt my spirits sink. For weeks I had been trying short posts, a few notebook templates, even some free promotions on social media. Nothing brought results. I decided to take a few days to breathe. But then my eyes landed on Mark's notebook, where I had written those promises to myself. I sighed and whispered, "One more time." That afternoon I sat at the kitchen table. I made a cup of chamomile tea and opened a new document. This time, I didn't write tips or recipes. I wrote about the pain that had followed me for years: losing a life partner. I titled it, "Surviving Loss: Small Steps to Move Forward." Words poured onto the screen. I wrote about the first night after the funeral, when I didn't dare turn off the nightlight for fear of the dark. I wrote about learning to fix a leaking faucet, to weed the garden things Mark used to take care of. I described the loneliness of sitting alone in church, in the empty pew beside me, a gap that could not be filled. I didn't sugarcoat it or pretend to be strong. I wrote the truth, as if talking to a friend who understood. When I finished, I looked at the manuscript, more than 40 pages, and my hands trembled. It didn't look like any digital product I had seen for sale online. No fancy layout. Just black text on white. A few hurried typos here and there. I thought, who would pay to read the sorrow of a 70-year-old woman? Then I remembered Mark's line, "Turn the pain into strength." I hit publish and priced it at $3.99 on a self-publishing platform. I expected nothing. But just 2 days later, my inbox showed my first sale. I sat frozen, my heart racing. One day passed, then two, and the numbers climbed. By the following week, I had sold more than 30 copies. I thought someone might have purchased it by chance. Then something unexpected happened. A woman named Martha, I remember the name clearly, emailed me. She wrote, "I lost my husband 7 months ago. Reading what you wrote, I saw myself in it. You wrote my pain exactly." I began to cry, tears spilling onto the keyboard. Not because of the money, but because for the first time in years I felt I had truly touched another person's heart. I whispered, "Thank you, Martha. Thank you for letting me know I'm not useless." Within weeks, that little ebook spread through a community group for widows. They shared the link and left comments. Sales grew into the hundreds. Each notification on my screen felt like a new heartbeat, pulling me out of the invisible shadow I had accepted. One evening, I sat by the window watching Pittsburgh light up in the dark. A question rose in me. What if I could build something from this, not just write, but create a place, a home for people who felt left behind? I opened a new notebook and wrote in big letters, on the first page, Silver Dawn Collective. I chose that name because I pictured a silver dawn, a pale but steady light that appears after a long, dark night. For me, Silver Dawn was not only a new beginning but a promise no matter your age. You can find your own dawn. I began designing a small blog and added a simple logo, a silver sun rising behind a line of mountains. I posted the first ebook and wrote short pieces about finding joy in small things. Readers came from everywhere, leaving comments like, "You wrote what's in my heart, and I don't feel so alone anymore." Those words were like warm breath, thawing my heart after long years of cold. For the first time since Mark died, I no longer felt I was merely waiting for time to pass. I was moving forward, small steps, but steady. And this time, I was not walking alone. 2 years had passed since the first ebook was downloaded, and my life quietly shifted like a river finding its way to the sea. From the small blog, Silver Dawn Collective, I expanded onto Etsy, where I sold simple printed journals and note pages with encouraging lines I designed myself. At first, there were only a few orders a week, but then one positive review led to another, and thank you emails turned into larger orders. At the same time, I learned how to publish on Amazon, KDP. It was a difficult process, but I remembered Mark sitting at his drafting table at night, patiently refining every small detail of a machine sketch. I treated my words the same way, checking each error, arranging each chapter, finding the right cover. Surviving Loss was republished as a paperback, and I received a message from a reader in Minnesota saying she had brought the book to her church's support group for widows. I sat still, tears rolling down my trembling hands. I began a paid newsletter. Every Friday, I sent a letter titled Silver Dawns. I wrote about replanting the flower bed in front of the house, about an afternoon walk through the park, listening to children laugh, about the sadness that remained but that I'd learned to live with. Subscribers grew more than I expected, first a few dozen, then a few hundred, then a few thousand. With each email I sent, I received replies. "You write as if you're sitting and talking with us." Or these words gave me the strength to stand up again. The numbers grew into the tens of thousands of readers. But the important thing wasn't only quantity, it was the sense of connection. I was no longer the woman forgotten at that Christmas table. I had found my own community. The money I saved began to take shape, from a few $100s to a few thousand. I still live simply toast and coffee for breakfast, and vegetable soup at night. No extravagant shopping. Any extra I carefully put into savings. Then one day, when I had enough, I decided to buy a small apartment in downtown Pittsburgh. I remember signing the papers with hands that shook, part excitement, part joy. I whispered, "Mark, did you see? I did it." That apartment was not just property, it was a symbol that I would not let pain bury me. I kept this a secret. No one told David. No one told Patricia. In their eyes, I was still the old woman living off a small pension. And I let them believe that. I continued to invest. Once, in a women's entrepreneurship group I belonged to, someone mentioned a small co-investment opportunity in a medical startup, researching rehabilitation devices for older adults. I read the prospectus and saw glimpses of Mark. He used to say, "We need tools to help older people keep their independence." I decided to put a portion of my savings into it. Not much, just a seed. But I believed, and that seed began to sprout. While my family stayed busy with lavish vacations and noisy dinners I was rarely invited to, I quietly built my own little empire. Each evening, after sending the newsletter, I checked the numbers, revenue rising. New subscribers. Printing contracts. The screen's light reflected on my aged face. But my eyes held the youthful spark of desire. One autumn afternoon, I received an email from a major media company. They wanted to buy Silver Dawn Collective, offering a contract worth millions of dollars. I sat motionless for a long time. The ticking of the wall clock merging with my racing heart. Those figures seemed almost unreal. But the signature on the email was undeniably real. I closed my laptop, stood slowly, and poured myself a cup of hot tea. The chamomile aroma brought me back to the present. I thought of that past Christmas Eve when I sat silently in the corner, with no gift and no look of recognition. And now, here in my hands, was a chance to change everything. No one in my family knew. They still saw me as the same old shadow, only appearing when they needed a pie or someone to watch the kids. But I knew better than anyone. All those cold ashes in my heart had begun to flare. And this flame was strong enough to brighten that once frozen room that had left me behind. One afternoon in early December, as I sat in my newly purchased apartment, with the sunset streaming through the glass window, the phone suddenly rang. Patricia's name appeared on the screen. I stared at it, my chest tightening. So many years had passed since her last call. The details long forgotten, only the feeling remained. Of being treated like a stranger. I picked up after a few rings. Hello, Ruth. It's me, Patricia. Her voice sounded stiff, trying to coat itself with sweetness. I answered plainly, yes, Patricia. What is it? There was a throat clearing on the other end. Then she spoke in a rehearsed tone. David, and the kids, well, the whole family was thinking it's been so long since you came for Christmas dinner. This year, if you're free, we'd like to invite you. I stayed silent for a few seconds. The sounds outside filtered in the screech of a streetcar, the whistle of wind through the cracks. My heart slowed, pulling me back to those past Christmases, me sitting alone by the old tree in my living room, the blinking lights mocking me. Well, that's a surprise, I said softly. Patricia gave a light laugh, but it was dry, without warmth. Yeah. Well, the kids keep mentioning Grandma. I thought Christmas is for family. It would be nice if you came. I didn't ask why they suddenly remembered me. I didn't mention the years they couldn't even bother with a phone call. I simply said, all right, Patricia, I'll come. We exchanged brief goodbyes. I set the phone down, my hands trembling, not from emotion, but from the irony pressing in. After all those years of silence, and now, right after I had signed a contract transferring my company for $8,200,000, they remembered me. I walked to the wooden cabinet and opened the bottom drawer. A thick file with a dark blue hard spine lay neatly inside. I brushed my fingers across the bold letters, Agreement of Sale, Silver Dawn Collective. Inside was the number that had stunned me the first time I saw it. $8,200,000. Not a dream, but the fruit of sleepless nights, of tears, of the loneliness I had turned into words. I closed the file, slid it into a thick envelope, and tucked it into my worn leather bag. I gave a faint smile. If they really want to see me, this time, they'll see everything. In the days that followed, I prepared for the trip. I wrapped small gifts for the grandchildren, a knitted scarf for little Emma, a teen novel for Jacob. Simple things, but chosen with care. No less meaningful than the fancy packages Patricia flaunted on social media. I picked out a navy sweater Mark had always liked, along with the scarf I had bought on a short trip to Vermont. The night before departure, I sat by the window, Pittsburgh stretching out under golden lights. On the table, steam curled from a cup of chamomile tea. Inside me was a strange blend of calm and anticipation. I knew this Christmas would be different. No longer the silent woman sitting at the edge of the table. I would walk into that house carrying a truth they never imagined. As I closed my suitcase, my hand lingered on the file. It was as if I could hear Mark whispering, "You've come this far. Ruth, don't be afraid." I drew a deep breath, packed everything neatly, and set the bag beside my bed. The next morning, pale winter sunlight slipped through the curtains. I pulled my suitcase to the door and locked the apartment behind me. Before leaving, I turned back one last time at the small but warm home where I had wept, laughed, and written the words that changed my life. I knew the steps ahead weren't just toward a Christmas dinner. They were steps back into the years of being dismissed. Steps to place the truth on the table. Truth no one in the family had ever had the courage to face. And in the bag beside me, the $8,200,000 contract lay silent. Like a weapon. Like a declaration. I pressed my lips together. This Christmas, nothing would be the same. David and Patricia's house glowed with Christmas lights as I walked in. Wreaths hung neatly. The tree shimmered with silver, red, and green ornaments. Everything arranged like a magazine spread. I drew a long breath, catching the faint scent of cinnamon and roasted chicken. It was the true spirit of the holiday, warm for everyone. Except me. Patricia stepped forward. Her lips stretched into a polite smile. "You're here. How wonderful." But her eyes said something else, distant. Cold. The greeting meant only for a guest required to be there. I nodded, handed her a small gift basket. Patricia took it, offered a flat compliment, then turned away without so much as a hug. When I sat at the table, I noticed my place card set at the far end, right next to the serving cart. Away from the center, away from the conversation. I smiled faintly and pulled out the chair. I was used to it. Glasses of red wine filled the table. Silverware clinked. David told work stories. The kids talked about new clothes and trips abroad. I stayed quiet, picked at a bit of salad, listening to the knife slice through crispy meat. Now and then, Patricia turned to me with a token question. "How have you been lately?" "Still enjoy gardening, yes. I still take care of the rose bushes out front." She nodded absently and shifted right back to another subject. A few minutes later, as the talk turned lively about investments and stocks, Patricia smirked. "And you? I suppose you're happy now with your retirement hobbies? Knitting, journaling, that sort of thing." The table went quiet for a moment. Then a thin layer of laughter rippled through. No one looked directly at me, but the chuckles lingered just long enough to make me the butt of the joke. David scratched his head, gave a weak laugh, pretending not to hear the rudeness. I set my spoon down gently, lifted the teacup before me. Cinnamon and honey drifted sweetly upward. I took a slow sip, letting the warmth spread down my throat. Then I raised my head and gave the faintest smile. In my eyes, though, Patricia never noticed, there was a different gleam, the light of someone holding a secret too powerful to be shaken by ridicule. I spoke softly, just enough to be heard. "Yes, I still enjoy writing. Some passions never grow old in a lifetime." Patricia flicked her hand, scoffing, and the conversation rolled on, swept away with laughter and clinking glasses. But for me, time slowed. I felt my heart beat steady, calm. The bag resting at my feet was heavy, weighted with a secret waiting to be revealed. In that moment, I remembered Mark's words. "If one day you find yourself left behind, turn the pain into strength." And I knew that tonight. That strength was alive. Right here, at this table. I sat still, the quiet observer, letting them think I was only the old woman busy with her little retirement hobbies. I sipped more tea, the soft sweetness settling in, and behind that faint smile, my heart no longer trembled. There was only calm. The calm of someone who knows she is about to change the entire room with just a few sheets of paper and a thick envelope. Children's laughter rang out from the living room. Patricia clapped her hands. Her voice sharp and high. It's time to open the presents. Everyone pushed back their chairs, moving toward the towering Christmas tree covered in twinkling lights. Red and green reflections danced across their faces. Wrapping paper crackled. Ribbons dropped onto the carpet. The scent of pine, mixed with vanilla candles, filling the room with holiday cheer. David handed each child large boxes. They squealed with delight, tearing the paper to reveal game consoles, dolls, and designer clothes. Patricia received a box from David, carefully unwrapping it to reveal a new leather handbag. Her eyes lit up as if the whole world belonged to her. Thank you, darling. It's perfect, she chirped, holding the bag high for everyone to see. I sat in an armchair tucked just behind the tree. The blinking lights cast shadows across my face, deepening the darkness. I stayed silent, clutching a cup of cold tea. No gift was passed to me. No name of mine was called. Again. The sound of ripping paper filled the room. Laughter echoing. Phone, cameras clicking. It all blended into a noisy symphony where I had no place. My grandson Jacob looked around and asked, "Doesn't Grandma have a present?" Patricia flicked a glance at me, then forced a laugh and waved her hand. Oh, I must have forgotten. Too busy this year. But I'm sure Mom understands. Right, the room broke into thin, awkward laughter. A few eyes slid toward me, then quickly away. As if my absence from the celebration was nothing more than a trivial oversight, I set the teacup down on the table, the sound sharp in the festive air. Then I stood, slowly, my shoulders straight. The room quieted, even the tearing of paper pausing for a beat. I looked around, my eyes resting on David, then Patricia, then the children. "You forgot me," I said, my voice low but clear. But someone else did not. Silence. Only the ticking of the wall clock and the flickering lights reflected in their eyes. I bent down, pulled the leather bag from under my chair, and unzipped it carefully. Every pair of eyes followed. I drew out a thick envelope and stepped to the coffee table, placing it in the center. I slid it forward into the light. "This is the sale agreement for Silver Dawn Collective," I said, my voice steady, almost calm. "Last week I signed it. And yesterday, the first payment cleared my account. Value, $8,200,000. The air shattered, as though a crystal glass had hit the floor. Patricia's mouth hung open, eyes wide, her hands clinging to the new purse. David froze, his face flushed red with confusion. The children stopped mid-play, their wide eyes locked on me, not understanding the number, but sensing the weight in the room. What are you talking about?" Mom, David stammered. I looked directly into his eyes. "My company, the one I built, they bought it." Patricia cut in, her voice breaking. "You must be joking. You never had a company." I smiled faintly, but there was no gentleness in it. I pulled out the stack of financial reports and slammed them onto the table, the papers landing with a sharp crack. "The numbers are right here. Revenue, profits, independent audits. You forgot me, treated me like a shadow. But the world out there did not." The room froze. The Christmas lights still blinked. But the air was lit by something else, the undeniable light of truth. I stepped back, lifted my chin, and said evenly, "You didn't give me a gift. But tonight, I am the gift you never dared to imagine." In David's eyes I saw shock, tinged with regret. In Patricia's, I saw fear, the fear of realizing the woman she had dismissed held more power than she could fathom. And in the children's eyes, for the first time, I saw admiration shining bright. The room was utterly still, as though every sound had frozen. I breathed slowly, steadily, feeling each second drop, knowing with certainty this Christmas Eve, everything had changed forever. David cleared his throat, as if trying to break down the wall of silence. He looked at me, then at Patricia, his eyes flickering. Finally, his voice came. A little shaky, Mom. What you've done is incredible. But instead of carrying all of this alone, maybe we could do it together. You know, as a family partnership, I have business experience, and Patricia has connections. We could grow your company even bigger. Patricia jumped right in, her stiff expression melting into a syrupy smile, though her eyes betrayed calculation. Exactly. Mom, honestly, I've always thought that if the whole family could join hands, this would be a legacy. You've laid the foundation, and we'll preserve it, expand it. That way, you won't have to work hard anymore. You can just rest and let us handle things. I looked at them. Just minutes ago, I was the old woman with retirement hobbies. And now suddenly, I was the center of their sweet words. I slowly lifted my teacup, took a sip, then set it down. My voice was calm but edged with steel. You didn't want me when all I had was love. Don't expect me now that I have money. Patricia went pale. Her already fair skin froze stiff, her lips parting as if to argue. But no words came. David bowed his head, fingers laced together, his knuckles white. The air thickened, heavy. The Christmas lights flickered across their faces, revealing every expression. My hand rested lightly on the envelope. I didn't need to wave it around, its mere presence was enough to bow their heads. Then came a choking sob. Emily, my eldest granddaughter, her eyes red and brimming, tears spilling like a broken dam. She sprang up, her voice trembling. Granny, I'm sorry. I know I've stayed quiet too long. I saw how they treated you, but I never dared to speak. I was scared. I was a coward, but I never once thought you were a burden. You're the only one in this house who ever listened to me. The room froze again. Patricia turned, trying to stop her. But Emily yanked her arm free and rushed into my embrace. Her small shoulders shook, tears soaking into the sweater I wore. I gently placed my hand on her back, feeling her young heart racing. In that moment, I knew not everything was lost. Some seeds had been growing quietly in the dark, just waiting for light. David cleared his throat, forcing steadiness. Emily, you don't understand. Your grandma did this for herself, not the family. And Emily lifted her head. Cutting him off? No. Dad, I understand perfectly. I saw how you and Mom Patricia left her sitting alone so many times. I remember her birthday, nobody came. I wanted to call, but I was afraid you'd yell at me. I regret it so much. Her voice cracked, thick with grief. I held her tighter and whispered, it's all right. Emily, you've spoken up now, and that's the bravest thing. Patricia stood frozen, her face locked tight. David kept his head down, unable to meet either his daughter's eyes or mine. The darkness outside seemed to pour in, blending with the heavy silence. I drew a deep breath. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. Because in this cold room, there was still one heart that remembered me with true love. I looked at Patricia and David, my voice calm but resolute. Family isn't a ticket to show up when I have money. Family is the place that stands beside me when I have nothing. The words fell like a blade, tearing through their thin veneer. No one replied. Only Emily's grip on my hand tightened, her silent hold more powerful than any words. And in her tear-filled eyes, I saw it clearly in this confrontation. I had chosen where I stood. I sat still, listening to the crackle of the fire in the fireplace, then leaned slightly toward Emily. Her small hand was still clutching mine. Warm and trembling, I squeezed back, steady and certain, as if to say, "You're not alone, and neither am I." In that moment, I knew I didn't need to say another word. I rose, slipped on my worn coat, and reached for the suitcase by the door. David lifted his head slightly, as if to speak, but the words froze on his tongue. Patricia sank deeper into her chair, eyes averted, lips pressed tight. Emily followed me, helping pull my suitcase to the porch. The air outside was biting cold, our breath rising in clouds. Snow drifted softly, dusting the street in silver. I inhaled deeply, letting the chill fill my lungs, then stepped forward, each step heavy, yet firm. Emily hugged me tightly, whispering, "Granny, I'll find you, soon, I promise." I nodded, smoothed her hair, then walked toward the taxi, waiting at the curb. As the door closed, I looked back at the house, still glowing with lights, where all the laughter from before had gone silent. In my heart, there was no bitterness, only release. I had left for good this time. Back at my apartment, I switched on the light. Warmth filled the space, carrying the scent of new wood and fresh fabric from the sofa. I set my suitcase down, hung up my coat, and went straight to the small desk by the window. My familiar laptop sat waiting. I opened it and began typing the first words of a new post. "The Christmas I gave myself back." Each word swept away old dust from my heart. I wrote about that Christmas night. The long table without a seat for me, the hollow look in my son's eyes, and the moment I stood up and reclaimed my worth. When I finished the last line, I read it again, exhaled softly, and pressed publish. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Thousands of comments poured in. "You put my pain into words. I'm 72 and never dared say this. Thank you for speaking for us. I read this while crying. You gave me the courage to start again." I broke into tears, but they were different tears. No longer the tears of hurt, but of connection. At last, my voice wasn't just for a cold, silent room. It was for thousands of women across America. 3 months later, I created the Mentorship Circle for women over 65. Just a small group at first, a few dozen women on Zoom. But together, we laughed. We cried. We learned how to set up accounts, write posts, sell small products. In every face I saw a part of myself, women once forgotten, now learning to step into the light. One afternoon, as the snow melted into streams along Pittsburgh's sidewalks, Emily arrived with a small suitcase, knocking on my door. Her face glowed, her eyes bright with determination. "I want to live with you. And I want to learn. Teach me how you did it." I pulled her into my arms, my heart racing like youth again. From that day, we sat side by side at the laptop. I taught her how to write newsletters, design digital products, manage customer feedback. The screen's glow lit up both our faces, the young and the old, 2 generations reflecting each other, walking a new path together. Time passed, and my circles of connection spread. Newspapers took notice. Interviews reached out. I realized my story was no longer just mine. It was a mirror for millions of women. And then, the day of fate arrived. When David and Patricia returned home from a short trip, they switched on the living room TV. And there, on the big screen, during the evening news, my face appeared calm smile, steady voice. When they returned home, they saw my face on the news because I had become the woman everyone was talking about. You see, sometimes silence and being overlooked are the very sparks that ignite our strength. I chose to rise not for revenge, but to find myself again. And you, if you were in my place, would you stay silent, or would you stand up and rewrite your fate? Share your thoughts in the comments. Your story might just be the encouragement someone else needs. Thank you for listening to my story. If you'd like to continue the journey, and follow Shattered Trust, so you won't miss more stories about family, trust, and the power of reclaiming yourself. Each story is a reminder that we are never truly alone. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for giving me your time today.